My name is John V. Welcome to Chautauqua People. Our guest today is Peter Georgescu. Peter was born in Bucharest, where his family was in the upper levels of Romanian society. His father was employed by Standard Oil of New Jersey during World War II, while the Romanian government was under control of Ion Antonescu, supported by the Iron Guard fascist movement. Peter and his brother Costa were sent from Bucharest to live with their grandparents in the village of Lipova as their father joined the resistance movement. In 1941, his father was arrested by the fascists and imprisoned until the end of the war. Upon release in 1945, he resumed his work with Standard Oil, and the family spent 2 very happy post-war years together. However, while Peter's parents were in the United States on a business trip, Stalin's forces seized control of Romania as a vast Iron Curtain fell across Europe. Everyone knew that Peter's father was unable to return home because he would have been immediately arrested and executed. Around age 10, Peter, his older brother, and grandmother were put into hard labor. The boys lived with their grandmother and were required to perform the worst of near-slave labor jobs by the communist government when they should have been attending school. During this time, his grandfather was executed in a communist prison. Peter was reunited with his parents in 1954 at the age of 15 after President Eisenhower arranged for the boys freedom in return for some Russian spies held by the United States. He arrived in this country and was greeted by his parents, whom he hardly remembered. He was accepted by the headmaster of Exeter Academy, despite having no knowledge of the English language and only a 3rd grade education. He mastered the language and academics necessary eventually to attend Princeton, where he graduated cum laude. He subsequently earned an MBA from Stanford. Instead of following his father and entering the oil industry, Peter joined Young and Rubicam, a marketing and communications company, where he remained for 40 years, retiring as chairman and chief executive officer. He began coming to the institution in the year 2000 as he anticipated retirement. He and his wife purchased a Chautauqua cottage, which they have decorated in red, white, and blue. His latest book, Constant Choice, an everyday journal from evil toward good, was published this year by Greenleaf Book Press. Peter, welcome to Chautauqua People.
Thank you. Nice to be with you, John.
Thank you so much. Now, please tell me about your parents and how they came to the United States and what efforts they made to get you into the country also.
Well, my parents left us in the middle of January, as I recall, and they came to New York for a 2-week visit, or at least it was supposed to be a 2-week visit. And Dad came to New York to work with his colleagues at Standard Oil of New Jersey, and it was a routine annual or so business trip. It was just at that moment that the Iron Curtain came down, and the Soviets took over not only Romania, but many other countries in the Eastern Bloc. So now the division between Eastern Europe and Western Europe took place, and there it was. And it was a brutal regime. Nobody could get in or out of the country without permission. In fact, you couldn't even leave your little town without getting permission from the police to leave your little town. It was dictatorship at its highest form, but that's the way it was. Now, as you mentioned in my bio, my father would have been killed. And the evidence for that is that the Romanian government rounded up some 300,000 leaders. They were political leaders, religious leaders, business leaders, influentials, anybody that the regime felt they could be a threat to the new communist regime was rounded up and eventually killed.
Okay. Now, did the regime try to get your father to cooperate?
Well, that was long after. They kept us, we were surprised, as a matter of fact, retrospectively, how come they didn't arrest us or kill us, as they eventually did with my grandfather, who was a very famous politician. He was almost 80 years old, but he didn't get spared.
Right.
And so he got murdered in jail. Some prison guard, as a matter of fact, watching him scrub his floor, which was a daily routine in prison, in shackles, 80 years old, decided to kick him in the face until he died. That's the way it was. And you know, for us, it was you know, surprise that we were kept alive.
Right.
Very surprised. But then they had a good reason for it, as it turned out later on. They thought they could use us.
Right.
And that's why they kept us alive and put us into hard labor.
Right. What were some of those jobs?
Well, in the beginning, I was asked to, or told to go into the sewers of this town called Botoșani. And it was always cold and damp. And I remember having to go to work always in the dark because I had to be there before 6 o'clock in the morning. I was slight enough and scrawny enough to be able to fit in the underground tunnels. And I can still remember having to bend over at the waist, carrying buckets full of sludge to the opening to clean the sewers. So I did that for a bunch of years. And of course there was no schooling, that was work 6 days a week, and on Sundays you slept. God blessedly, you slept throughout the whole day. And that was our life. Later on I got to work on the electric lines. I dug holes for electric poles and telephone poles around the city. I also had to turn off the lights in the city. And it was a challenging job because I had to find the right switch. And the right switch was critical because it had a 3 to 4 inch handle. And if I got the handle, the wooden handle, it was great. But if my hand touched the open metal, I often would get slammed to the ground as some 300 volts would come through my body, and that's what would happen.
Right.
So, you know, it was a little bit different what I had to do compared to what most kids around the world would learn in high schools. But it was a different kind of education. I learned a lot.
Right, right. Now, tell me about your father then. Was he trying to get you out of Romania?
My father and my parents, actually, my mother and father borrowed every penny they could in various adventures to get us out, to no avail. And then the Romanians blessedly decided, of course in retrospect, all of this, it was in 1953, so now it was about almost 7 years after they left. And my parents had become American citizens because they knew they could never go back to communist Romania.
Right.
So the Soviet diplomats and the Romanian diplomats came to see my father, and simply put, they said, look, Mr. Georgescu, if you want to see your children alive, you're going to spy for us. Net. So Dad went to the FBI the following morning and said, what do I do? They said, well, become a double agent. And my dad said, look, I've seen that play before. It never ends well. Sooner or later, I will not be able to do something they will ask of me, or I wouldn't want to do something they will ask of me, and they'll kill the kids anyway. What else?
Right.
So they said, go to the press, tell the story, create a scandal so big that the Soviets will be embarrassed to kill the kids. The Soviet wanted to be thought of around the world as good people and kind and thoughtful, a real alternative to the imperialist Americans. And the story did go public. That's how actually a congresswoman from Ohio, Frances Bolton, called Dad and said, I'll get the boys out. She went to Eisenhower. Long story, but eventually Ike made the deal that you talked about.
That's wonderful. And then you came to the States.
April 13th, 1954. A memorable day in my life.
And Independence Day.
Yes, an Independence Day. A new birthday.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, what did you do that first year back?
Well, the first little bit was, you know, the 15 minutes of sun. Well, it was about 2 weeks of celebrity thing. You know, my brother and I went to Ebbets Field through the opening ball at the Ebbets Field Stadium. I became a Dodger fan, of course, pretty much my whole life, even after they left Brooklyn. It was an issue of learning English. I didn't speak a word of English. And that's when the principal of Exeter called my dad up and said, I'll do something for the young boy. And Dad explained, no English, very little education. And she said, he learned a lot of other things. come to see me in August at Exeter, and we'll see how it goes.
Right.
And fortunately, he liked me.
Good.
He liked me, so I was in.
Good. Good. Now, was that experience at Exeter easy for you?
Well, it was fascinating.
Right.
You know, as a matter of fact, it turned out that on the way out the door after he told me that he liked me, well, he told me two things. He said, I have a deal for you. He said, if you can pass your courses on your own with no dispensation, whatever, you get to stay. If not, I'll find the right school for you. Is that okay? I didn't know what the heck he was talking about. I said, yes. And then, by the way, he said, what grade would you like to be in? I said, I'd like to be in with boys my own age. He said, what difference does it make? You'll be a sophomore.
Great.
So that's how I got into Exeter. I spent 3 years there.
Great.
No, it wasn't. It was obviously hard, but I knew hard work.
Right.
After working 10, 12-hour days, 6 days a week of hard labor, you understand what rigor and discipline and hard work is about.
Right.
So that wasn't an issue. I was so thirsty for knowledge. I was so thirsty for intellectual development that for me, there was a lot of joy involved. It was hard. It had to have been hard. I don't remember the hard part at all.
Right. Tell me about the famous Harkness table at Exeter. How did that work?
Well, the Harkness table is an extraordinary device that now is being used by other schools, and Exeter has gone out of its way to educate and help other schools carry out this format. It's an oval table with about 10 or so young men sitting, now young men and women, sitting around the table. And the teacher is really a facilitator. Everybody does their work, and believe me, you don't want to get caught in that kind of a situation for open discussion with your colleagues and your classmates without being prepared.
Right.
And so you discuss, you debate, you challenge each other, and all the teacher does is keep the conversation on track. And toss up a few important points of discussion and so forth.
Right.
So it's a way to give yourself confidence in your ideas, to be willing to accept challenges from others,
Right.
To be criticized sometimes and not take it personally.
Right.
There's a superb education at a different level than just learning facts and figures.
Right. So did you take that experience with you throughout life?
Without a doubt. Exeter gave me the foundation that I needed. I made up an awful lot of years. Exeter did that for me. Importantly, not only the knowledge that I accumulated, but the style in which I had to learn, and I had to grow, and I had to mature. So yes, it stuck with me throughout my educational career and throughout my life.
Right, right. Now, you graduated from Exeter, and then you went to college.
I went to Princeton. After 3 years at Exeter, I went to Princeton.
Okay,
Yes.
and how well did you finish up at Princeton?
I did okay. I graduated with honors, so
Couldn't
that
be
was
okay.
Perfectly okay.
Great, great. So you graduated cum laude, I understand.
Cum laude, yeah.
Cum laude, okay. And then what happened after Princeton?
Then I decided I was supposed to go into the Marine Corps. I joined as a typical immigrant. I wanted to serve my country. And I joined the Marine Corps, which was Navy ROTC, except I got sick my junior year.
Right.
I got an ulcer. In those days, they thought ulcers were a sign of mental weakness. You couldn't be a tough guy, worrisome, and all the rest of it. Now we know, of course, that ulcers are created by bacteria.
It's an infectious disease.
It's an infectious disease. They didn't know that then. So I was disqualified medically from the Marine Corps. I didn't know what to do. So I applied to the business school. And I was a bit naive. I applied to only one school. I wanted to go to the West Coast. After all, this is my new country.
Right.
I wanted to learn the new country. So
Right.
go West, young man.
Right.
And that's how I ended up at Stanford.
Right. Now, coming out of Stanford, was there any discussion of following your father into the oil industry?
As a matter of fact, I had a job. The Standard Oil folks offered me a job. I got to know some of the people. They offered me a job and said, if you graduate from Stanford Business School, you've got a job at Esso International.
Right.
So I was plenty excited about that, but as it turns out, by total accident, I ended up going to the advertising and marketing business.
Right. Was that a good fit?
Well, it turned out to be okay for me. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. I learned a lot about people. it was a very heavily oriented research company, heavy on the analytics part of it. I enjoyed that business enormously, and I ended up doing okay.
Right, and you ended up at the end as
Chairman and CEO. Yes.
Chairman and CEO, so you did extremely well, didn't you?
Did okay.
Now, you lived overseas at some point and traveled around,
Yes.
and I assume your experience in two cultures was immensely beneficial preparation for that.
Well, it took a while for me to be willing to go overseas.
It did.
They asked me from, I wasn't there more than 3 or 4 years, and they said, oh, why don't you go to Australia? Why don't you go to Denmark? Why don't you go to Sweden? And I said, my wife doesn't want to go.
Okay.
It wasn't the truth, to be honest. I fibbed.
Right.
I wasn't ready to go.
You weren't
I
ready
wanted
to
to be in America. I wanted to learn the way of life. I wanted to be comfortable that I would have a foundation before I would go. But ultimately, my wife Barbara decided for us, hey, this is an international company. They're going to stop asking. Let's go.
Let's go. Okay.
So I said yes. I saluted,
And
as I have
moved
for 48 years.
And moved along.
And moved along.
Moved along. Okay. Now, you retired from Young and Rubicon in 2000. What have you been doing since retirement?
Well, this chapter of my life, John, is increasingly about payback, giving back. I've been so fortunate. I'm so grateful to this country. Number one, to be alive.
Right.
And to be here and to have the opportunity that I have had. And this is why I think I admire America enormously, because of the freedom and the opportunity that most of us who are lucky enough to get a good education can have. You can be the best you can be.
Right.
Just work hard enough, mind your P's and Q's, and do your thing, and you have the opportunity to do quite well.
Right.
So I loved America. I found this very special, and now it's, I feel, very important for me to pay back. So I'm vice chair of a large hospital in New York City.
Right.
I am involved as a director of many educational institutions, and I mentor young people. But I also am involved, continue to be involved in business because I have to stay relevant.
Right.
Stay
current.
So you have to stay current in what's happening in the business world,
Right.
both domestically and internationally.
Right. Right. So tell me about your Chautauqua experience. How did you come to Chautauqua?
Well, like many good things in my life, they came through my wife.
Right.
And Barbara had come here about 30, 35 years ago. A friend of her would bring her here for about a week. And she'd come back and tell me these wonderful tales of this intellectual stimulation, the art fair in the evening, this beautiful, picturesque, Disney-esque environment. You got to come. And I said to her, look, I'm an important guy. I'm kidding. But anyway, I felt that, you know, I couldn't afford to take the time
Right.
during the week, which is a lot of when things happen in Chautauqua.
Right.
So just when I was thinking about retirement, of course, she was the first to know about that. She said, okay, we're going to Chautauqua. So I said, of course. So we came, I decided that let's build for ourselves a little cottage here. And that was in '99.
Right.
And I retired in 2000, and here we are.
Here you are. And you've come every summer since then.
We've been here pretty much. We try to spend almost the entire season in Chautauqua in the summertime.
Right.
Because I can do things from here, and occasionally if I have to do a board meeting, just zip to New York for a couple of days.
Right.
But yes, we spend our time here.
We'll take care of that. Now, in this past year, you published this book, and I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about it, and perhaps, first off, where the title came from. This is a current publication.
Yes. You know, I told you how much I love this country. And in the last few years, I realized that I was more worried about the future of America than at any other point in my life.
Right.
And so I decided that one of the things that I might be able to do, particularly given my experience, is to try to convince all of us to kind of stop doing some of the nasty, evil things we seem to be doing to each other. And too much of that is going on.
Right.
I learned that as a young man. I saw it personally up close in my family and with myself and my brother. I saw it in the business world occasionally. It happens. I see it in politics today. I see the lying, the cheating. I see greed in what he does, as in the 2008 financial crisis.
Right.
I see it in all kinds of aspects of our lives. I see it in the lack of willingness to do the right thing, the lack of willingness to look for the other in our lives.
Right.
And this is what it's all about. So I wrote the book to say, let's stop relying on the evil side of ourselves, and let's go to the really good aspect of our lives.
Right.
Let's take advantage of the goodness and generosity and compassion that also exists in us. And we have a choice to make, and that's where the title of the book comes from. A constant choice, a daily choice, where we have to be able to increasingly choose to do the good.
Okay. So that becomes our challenge, is it not? And I know I read this book and went through and marked up points that were significant to me and put a paperclip on them, and I have 10 of them. And that's, for me, that's a high number for a book this size. And I'm not going to read the book here to our viewers, but I would urge everybody, obtain a copy and give it some good time. It's an easy read, but it will be a high payoff activity for you. And I'm very sincere about that. Now, as you take a look at this title, and you're saying that we have this constant choice that has to be made, a major theme in the book is your religious views. Could you tell me how your beliefs about God were formed and how they've changed over the years?
Well, when I was a youngster, I learned a lot from my grandparents, and I developed a very simple model that has in fact sustained me during the tough times in the work camp.
Right.
And the model was very simple. There were good guys in this world and bad guys in this world. And the good guys were going to win. And I had this vision of Jesus Christ as the uber hero. He was Superman.
Right.
You know, not short of, I didn't know about the telephone booth in those days,
right.
but that was kind of my mental image. Sooner or later, the good guys will triumph, the good guys are going to win. And if you work hard enough, if you really had the courage of your convictions, and if you had integrity, you were going to win. I was naive. I was a little boy. I was under, a teenager. But I had this deep conviction. And then later on, I obviously found that my simplistic model didn't work. I found out that good people do some terrible things. And I almost fell apart. Say, how can that be?
Right.
And then I realized that we are free people. We have a choice. We have to choose how we treat each other, how we treat ourselves. And that choice determines the characters. It's not what happens to you in life that makes a difference.
Right.
That's not who your character is. It's how you respond to what happens to you that determines who you are and your character.
Right.
And so I was committed all my life to try to avoid being the evil person that I saw my guards, the people who put us in that work camp.
Right.
And I said, that's not what you're going to do, Peter. No matter how seductive it may be, and how many shortcuts, and how you might be able to profit from this thing, it isn't worth it. When you do harm, when you do evil, you do harm to other people.
Right.
That's not acceptable.
Right.
And we have to choose the other way. And I have seen in my business life so many role models of people who succeeded because they were good people.
Right.
And they led by example. They not only talked the talk, they walked the walk.
Right.
And what a difference they made. And what different companies that are managed in that fashion.
Right.
And there are plenty of them out there.
Right.
And we need more of them. We need people in every aspect of leadership in this country, in our government, to do the same thing. To stop this kind of nonsense and the kind of tensions and antagonism that exists in our political system, and to say, it's about the common good, folks.
Right.
Let's do what's right. Let's do what things that matter to all of us individually and collectively.
Right.
And then we can win.
Right. Right. And so we worked on that way. Now, how does your Chautauqua experience fit with this belief about being a good person and doing what is constantly right?
Chautauqua is, first of all, is unique in the world.
Yes, sir.
And it's an educational experience for adults, and it's magnificent.
Right.
And it sharpens one's views. You have an opportunity to converse and discuss with some of the leaders and the leading intellectuals and the leading theologians in this field, and it sharpens who you are. You test your perspective, you test your opinions. And I found my 14, 15 years now in Chautauqua to be extraordinary in my personal development. I'm growing as a person.
Right.
I hope I never stop growing.
Right.
This is, in part, what Chautauqua does for me.
Okay, and it introduces you to new material and
New
process.
ideas, new materials, curiosity. Keep
Right.
pushing the limits of our ability to grow, to be free, to experience new and different things.
Right.
But always to try to be good.
Right. Now, are there any specific aspects of Chautauqua that are most significant to you, most important to you?
Well, I believe, I speak also for Barbara and myself, that the lecture program, the lecture program and the religious department at 2 o'clock, those lectures are the foundation for me what Chautauqua is about.
Right.
Is the intellectual, emotional, and spiritual development.
Right.
I prize that, I value that. And the art form that comes along with it is a wonderful complement, because it develops all your senses.
Mm-hmm.
And art is a great, important part of being a full human being, a creative person.
Right.
And this is what Chautauqua does to you. Whether you want it or not, you're
Indeed.
going to get it.
Indeed. Now, you've had this wonderful experience at Chautauqua. Can you tell me a little bit about your family?
Well, I have a wonderful family. In addition to my life's partner, Barbara, we have one son.
Right.
And I'm proud to say, not because he's just smarter than I am, which he happens to be, but he's a kind, nice person. Mm-hmm. It matters so much to me. The quality of an individual matters big time. So we're blessed with a wonderful son. Mm-hmm. We have 3 granddaughters, now 13, 16, and 18. In fact, the oldest, Adona, is just going to college this year.
Right.
I'm very excited about that.
Have those granddaughters been given a Chautauqua experience?
Oh, but of course. They love it here. They enjoy it here. God, from when they were very little guys, put in all they attended school. The youngest was 3 years old when she came here.
Right.
And put on these helmets on the bikes with or without the training wheels going on. That's how we started. And off they would go. And the freedom of Chautauqua was a wonderful place to help grow up.
Right. And so you had to go to Air Band and all those
Oh,
other
God, yes. Oh, what happened at Air Band is special.
Oh, wonderful
God.
things. Okay. And if you don't know what Air Band is, you need to come to Chautauqua.
Oh, absolutely.
And attend at least one Air Band experience and have a wonderful time. So how long then will you continue to come to Chautauqua, sir?
As long as my feet will carry me, I will come to Chautauqua. As I said, I think, and this is very important, this is a serious question, or I'll take it very seriously, because what the Constant Choice says to me is that our job, and my job, and our generation's job is not done. What are we going to leave behind for our children and grandchildren?
Right.
That's the fundamental issue.
Right.
And so far, we haven't distinguished ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the world has become much more difficult, much more complex, much more nuanced. But it's up to us to grow up.
Indeed.
And be able to deliver within this context, within this world, a more peaceful and more reassuring world for the future of our children. So I intend to keep growing. I intend to keep working. As long as I have the spirit and the faculties and the capacity to do a job, I know that tomorrow morning is up to me and you, John.
That's correct.
And us. I mean, that's it.
That's it.
So who else is going to do it? So I sign up and re-up in the army as a soldier.
Great.
On behalf of the good.
Great. Thank you very much. This has been Chautauqua People, and our guest has been one wonderful author, Peter Georgescu. Please get his book and read, and you will be richly rewarded. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, John. Nice to be with you.
Okay, so we're just going to...